What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. Today, we're here to discuss my instant takeaways from the Green Bay Packers' performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But first, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So as I said, we're here to discuss my instant takeaways. I take notes throughout the course of the game, type up this article once the game is complete. Again, as the title suggests, these are my instant takeaways, gut reactions to the Packers' performance. Do these after every game over at Packers Wire. You can find them all there. But let's dive into what stood out upon the initial viewing of the Packers game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. First up, that block extra point. That came back to be a big one in this game for the Packers, and you knew it would. So many of their games have been close this season. So many of their losses have been by one score. You just had a feeling that that block extra point was going to come back to bite them, and it absolutely did. Rather than needing a field goal on those last two possessions where they were well inside field goal range for Anders Carlson, Packers had to push, had to try to find their way into the end zone, and unfortunately it ended with a pair of Jordan Love interceptions at the end of the game, something that we've seen on other occasions when the Packers have had the opportunity to win games down the stretch. But while we're on the topic of Jordan Love, let's get to the second bullet point here. Not all losses are created equal, especially in what is an evaluation season for the Green Bay Packers. Yes, it's another loss, but from a process standpoint, overall, I think everybody should be encouraged by what we saw from Jordan Love. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't areas of improvement. Of course there are. There absolutely are. This isn't to say that, his stat sheet turned out well. Again, the what turned out on the stat sheet isn't a true indicator of, I think, what the performance was that we saw from Jordan Love against the Steelers. He was able to connect on a number of downfield and intermediate passes. From a process standpoint, there was a lot to like. He came up with some big throws on third downs, on fourth downs. Both of his touchdown passes were on third downs in this game. And after the offense being down 7 from the defense not being able to get a stop initially, the Packers offense that has struggled so much in the first half of games this year went down and scored. They overcame a 10-0 deficit to eventually take the lead. Again, I think there's a lot to like in this game. Some big-time throws from Jordan Love, some decisiveness. For the most part, some good decision-making on his part. And the Packers moved the ball really, really well in between the 20s. They averaged 6.1 yards per play as a team. And again, that's without a run game. We'll get to that here in a second. It's not as if they had a run game to lean on that was ripping off these chunk yardage. Dillon had the big 40-yard game, but other than that, it's a run game that didn't even average 4 yards per rush. The Packers found a lot of success in the passing game, and that 6.1 figure in their yards per play, to put into perspective, if they average that over the course of the season, that would be the third best total or average in the NFL through week 10 up until week 10. So again, puts into perspective that they were moving the ball really well. So very much struggled in the red zone, which I'll get to here in a second. But I think overall you have to be encouraged by Jordan Love's performance. I know it ended with 2 back-breaking interceptions at the end of the game. They again could not come through in that clutch moment to secure the win. But think back to that 4-game losing streak. The Lions game, the Raiders game, the Broncos game, the Vikings game even. Like, this performance from Jordan Love was far, far better than what we saw from him in those 4 games. And I get it. In those 4 games, the bar was fairly low. But this is a season that's about progress, about taking that step forward. And I feel like Jordan Love did that. After a solid performance last week against the Rams, he faced a very good front 7 that the Pittsburgh Steelers have. And again, took a step forward in my eyes in terms of, again, really focusing on the process, his ability to come up with some key throws and key moments outside of the end of the game, of course, which I know is the be-all, end-all in terms of determining the wins and losses. But I think Packer fans should be encouraged overall by what we saw from Jordan Love in this game. Next up, against one of the most productive front 7s in football, the Steelers' defensive line, their linebacking group. The Packers' offensive line, I thought, for the most part, held up really well. The Steelers came into this game with T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith, both ranked in the top 15 among edge rushers in pressures this season. As a team, the Steelers ranked 6th in pressure rate. They had the 3rd highest blitz rate coming into this game. I thought the offensive line, for the most part, they were able to hold their own in this one. Yeah, there are, of course, some plays you like to have back, but when you're going up against TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward in the middle, a team that blitzes as often as the Steelers do, like, that's going to happen. You're not going to truly just completely stop this front seven, that defensive front, but you hope to slow them down. You hope to not let them absolutely wreck the game. And I thought the Packers offensive line did that. Again, credit to Zach Tom, who's really gone through a gauntlet of top edge rushers in the NFL this season. And he continues to hold his own in that regard. The Steelers' defense overall have been really good at keeping points off the board this season, and the Packers unfortunately experienced that aspect. Like I mentioned, they moved the ball really, really well from the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line, but the Packers were just 1 of 5 in the red zone, and ultimately that was the deciding factor in this game. I mean, take the extra point out of the equation. The Packers had 5 opportunities inside the Steelers' 20 to put up a touchdown, and they only converted that one time on their opening drive. Other than that, there's either the interceptions at the end or they had to settle for field goals. And this is a Packers team where the margin for error for them is so small, and that gets magnified when it's in the red zone. So over the last 3 games against the Vikings, the Rams, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Packers have 13 red zone trips in those 3 games. That's 4.3 red zone trips per game. That's fantastic. That's great. That's excellent. However, they've converted, of those 13 trips to the red zone, only 3 of them into touchdowns. That is the opposite of great. That is the opposite of excellent. Ironically, as this offense as a whole appears to slowly be putting pieces of the puzzle together, where they've gone backwards is in the red zone. They actually had more success there earlier in the season when things were not going so well than what they've been experiencing currently. And like I said, when you're in the red zone, things get magnified. There's less space to operate within. Things are more condensed. It's more difficult to run the ball. It's more challenging for receivers to get open, and errors that you make are magnified, as I mentioned, and just more difficult to overcome. The defense, to a degree, has an advantage in that part of the field, like I said, just because there's less room to operate within. And for this Packers team that has such a small margin of error to work with, for a passing game that cannot consistently shoulder the playmaking burden that can be required in the red zone, especially when you don't have a run game to lean on, it just makes punching the ball in, getting that touchdown, all the more difficult. And I think we're really seeing that from this Packers team at the moment. So that was a difference in the game. I mean, there's the butterfly effect. If one of those early conversion or red zone attempts turn into a score, does that mean the game plays out the same way as it did? No. Could they have won? Absolutely. Even if they convert 3 of those 5, red zone opportunities into scores, they probably win comfortably. So the opportunity was there for them, but as Jordan Love said afterwards, they just didn't come up with the big plays when they needed to. And kind of a theme throughout the course of the season. I do want to touch on the interception that Love threw to Christian Watson. He talked about that after the game, as did Matt LaFleur. LaFleur said that ideally the ball probably wouldn't have gone there. There was a backside option that was more or better designed, or a better option for what the play design called for based on how the Pittsburgh Steelers defended the play. Love talked about how earlier in the game there was a double move that the Packers did. The Steelers jumped on it, and so it sounds like he may have been anticipating that again, but Patrick Peterson was absolutely all over Christian Watson on that play. The ball could have been, led a little bit more. Wasn't an egregious throw by Love by any means, but it sounds like from what LaFleur had to say, there was absolutely a better place that he could have gone with the ball at that point, resulting in an interception. And then the last one, there's 3 seconds on the clock. The Steelers had a litany of defenders lined up at the goal line. LaFleur said they ran a corner route that hopefully would have pulled one of the defenders, opening up a little window in the middle of the field for a crosser, but the Steelers stayed home. They stayed on the goal line. Pressure was in Love's face. He threw the ball where, had the defender vacated the area, there may have been some space for a window for him, but defender was there, easy interception. At that point of the game, you don't really have you don't have another option. You just got to kind of throw it up and hope for the best at that time. So red zone, absolutely an area where this Packers team is going to have to improve. Speaking of improvement, drops, big time issue for the Packers in this game. The Packers receivers, the running backs, some missed contested catches, opportunities as well for this team. So as I mentioned earlier, Jordan Love's stat line isn't going to look, as good as what I think the film will. But that drop pass has absolutely contributed to his lower completion percentage. Next up, we saw the Packers and Love really trying to push the ball downfield in this game. As I mentioned, they were able to connect on some of those intermediate, some of those deep passing routes. There's definitely been an improvement in that regard over the last few weeks, and I think there was twofold why we saw the Packers really try to leverage those downfield passing opportunities. One, the strength of the Steelers team, as you mentioned, is the front seven. The cornerbacks outside of Joey Porter Jr. have been picked on at times this season by, in the Steelers secondary. At safety, they were without Minkah Fitzpatrick. We also saw the Steelers crowding the line of scrimmage as well. So just from as Jordan Love's evaluating what the defense is giving him, what the play call is that the Packers have dialed up, that's where the opportunity was. So I think that's really why we saw the Packers trying to do that. They were trying to take advantage of the weak point in the Steelers defense, and they were able to find at least a little success on it. Without Jair Alexander, Corey Ballantyne got the start at cornerback in his absence. You could tell there were times when the Steelers were focusing on him in the passing game, and they did find some success, but I thought Ballantyne did a really good job of contesting passes, staying with the ball. I mean, even some of those completions he allowed, he was right there to make a play on it. And so I think an encouraging sign for the Packers, given now that with Stokes on IR, Jair was out, obviously Rasul Douglas is in Buffalo. We're getting pretty far down the cornerback depth chart. You don't exactly know what you're going to get in a game when you have to start relying on those individuals, especially Ballantyne, who was a practice squad player up until a few weeks ago. But I thought overall it was a solid performance from him, having to step in and replace Jair Alexander today. After a strong showing against the run the last 2 weeks, against the Vikings, against the Rams, the Packers had allowed just 2.3 yards per carry in those games. Believe it or not, they only allowed one rush in those games of 10 or more yards, but they were Swiss cheese in this one. The Pittsburgh offense, I mean, they came into this game averaging just 3.7 yards per carry. It's not like this was a super stout, high-powered rushing attack that the Packers were up against. 3.7 yards per carry is what the Steelers came into this game averaging, but they averaged just under 6 yards, had over 200 yards as a team on the ground. Just absolutely dominated the Packers in that regard. And how this Packers defense held up on first down in this game, it felt like ultimately decided the drive. Like if the Steelers were able to, pick up 4, 5, 6 yards on the ground, what they often did, put them in second and short, third and short, those advantageous situations for an offense, that's what really got the drives going for them. However, in those rare instances where the Packers were able to slow the run on first down, limit it to a yard or two, or for some reason when the Steelers came out passing the ball and is in an incomplete pass and they were in second and long, third and long, those predictable passing situations where now the defense has the advantage, can do the dictating, where the pass rush can pin its ears back. That's when we saw this Packers defense have that success, and they were able to find a stretch of that through the middle portion of the game. Steelers ran all over them early on, ran all over them in the fourth quarter, and which ultimately put the game away. But when the onus was on Kenny Pickett in the Steelers passing game, Packers defense was able to find some success. When they were leaning on the run game, finding early down success, the Steelers were dictating everything. And speaking of the defensive woes, the missed tackles from this Packers team was absolutely staggering. I mean, there were a number of runs where Najee Harris felt like 2-3 yards past the line of scrimmage before he was even contacted by a Packer defender. But there were also runs where him or Jaylen Warren, it looked like they were bottled up and somehow ended up getting a positive gain and even some chunk plays out of it. The missed tackles in this game were egregious by this Packers defense. I would guess it was for sure, if we look at Pro Football Focus's numbers on Monday, I'm going to guess that it's in the 10 range, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was in the 15 range in terms of missed tackles. And again, they've been better in that regard. These last 2 weeks, they've been much more sound in terms of tackling, but a big missed opportunity by this Packers team, by this defense, an area where they just really, really struggled in this game. There were also penalties early on in this game as well, and that was a key contributor to Pittsburgh's fast start. So on the opening drive, it was third down. There was the pass interference call on Carrington Valentine on a even if he didn't make the pass interference penalty, like that's an incomplete pass. Kenny Pickett way overthrew his receiver. Steelers' drive would have ended in that situation. They don't get a touchdown. However, pass interference, automatic first down, Steelers get a touchdown. On the next drive, there was defensive holding by Keyshawn Nixon. Had that defensive holding not happened, would have been 3rd and 10. And as we saw, as I just mentioned throughout the game, when the Steelers were in those obvious long passing situations, the offense struggled. And so that drive could have ended differently as well. And then on the 3rd drive of the game, there was an illegal contact by Jonathan Owens that wiped out a Packers sack. So again, the early penalties from this defense proved to be very costly because it ended with points for the Pittsburgh Steelers and put the Packers in that early hole that they had to dig themselves out of. All right, a couple more. I wrote last week and on the Saturday's video, discussed why the Packers would consider giving Sean Ryan some opportunities. And I also discussed the flip side of that, why I didn't think that was going to happen at this time. However, after the performance by Jon Runyan, I think that dialogue within the Packers organization about giving Ryan that opportunity, again, a 3rd-round pick from just last season who only has those 7 snaps that he took against the Rams under his belt. We really don't know what he has to offer this team. Runyan, on the other hand, he's in his 4th and final season of his rookie deal. The way he's playing right now, he is not going to get a second contract with the Green Bay Packers. So there's definitely an opportunity, a conversation to be had on why Ryan should get an opportunity moving forward. But Runyan continues to be the weak link in this offensive line. As I mentioned earlier, I thought overall, given the opponent, I thought this unit held up well, but Runyan continued to be very inconsistent. And then on one of their red zone trips, there was that screen to Aaron Jones where if Runyan can just pick up his block, it's a touchdown. It is a walk-in touchdown for Aaron Jones, but he essentially whiffs. Jones tackled. Packers end up settling with a field goal, which again cost them 4 points in a game that they lost by 4 points. So I think those conversations within 1265 Lombardi Ave about what their starting 5 looks like, potentially giving Sean Ryan, especially since he did so well in the run game where this offensive line can use a boost, I think those conversations need to get a little bit louder. Keyshawn Nixon, he's getting more return opportunities on kickoffs now that the weather's starting to change. Ball isn't flying as far. Opponents aren't able to just kick it through the end zone. And we're seeing that explosive play that he brings to the special teams unit, why he was an all-pro a season ago. In the last 2 games, he has 2 kick returns of over 50 yards. And for an offense that has struggled to move the ball this season, being able to have a shorter field, or even if they go 3 and out or end up having to punt, flipping that field position so now the opponent is backed up, it's huge for this Packers team right now. It's those little things like that that do mean a lot. On the run game, as I mentioned earlier, A.J. Dillon had the 40-plus yard run. Other than that, really struggled to get going. Really weren't any other chunk runs from this Packers offense. Steelers came into the game allowing 4.5 yards per rush. So as good as this defense is at getting after the quarterback, they haven't been as stout at stopping the run. Did a good job of slowing the Packers. What I will say is I thought the Packers did a good job of still churning out positive gains. You know, even if, like I said earlier, even if he can get 3 yards on first down, 4 yards on first down, you're in 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7, keeps you at least, level with the sticks. You want to be ahead of them, but doesn't put you behind them necessarily in those obvious passing situations where the defense can do the dictating. So thought that they did a good job in that regard. Thought in terms of the run-pass mix, keeping that balance, not getting too heavy in the pass, not becoming one-dimensional, despite trailing in the game, despite not picking up or having a ton of success in the run game. I thought that was a positive as well. Luke Musgrave had 2 more explosive passing plays. That's something that they've struggled to get going with him throughout the course of the season. He's now had 4 of those types of plays in the last 2 weeks alone. So again, he has that potential to just unlock so much for this offense, not only for himself in the chunk plays that he draws, but he has that gravity where defenses are going to lock in on him. He's going to attract defenders towards him. That's going to create opportunities elsewhere for others. So great to see that aspect, that element of this offense starting to get going because, as we all know, that speed, that size, that athleticism, Luke Musgrave can be an absolute difference maker. Turnover differential, Steelers won that battle 1-0. Obviously, this is a key aspect each week, not just for the Packers, but every NFL team, but feels particularly important for the Packers. Green Bay came into this game 1-3 when they lose the turnover battle. They're now 1-4. even when they win it, even when they tie it, they're 2-2. It's not a guaranteed win for them this season. The Steelers have been really, really good at forcing turnovers, had the third best turnover differential, and have been one of the best at taking care of the football as well. Packers weren't able to capitalize on some opportunities. Devondre Campbell missed what could have been a pick six. Keyshawn Nixon wasn't able to get both feet in, and I don't know what the heck that call was by the refs and how they did not overturn that fumble. Again, the Packers would have been inside their own 5-yard line with that play call going their way, but it didn't at the end of the day. So Packers didn't end up with a turnover, and again, that's been a key stat for them this season in terms of, if they lose it versus if they win it, and they lost it today. Lastly, the Jordan Love and Christian Watson connection, it is not working right now. And it's just difficult to envision this offense finding consistent success until it does. Watson brings that big playability. I referenced this in a previous video. We saw how, last season, how once he was able to get going, he had that breakout game against the Cowboys in Week 10, 4 receptions, 107 yards. That really turned the tide for this offense. How opponents defended Green Bay changed. Watson obviously brought that big playability, opens up opportunities for others, opens up opportunities in the run game. Just a massive trickle-down effect when you can get someone like Christian Watson going and able to find that success just with his overall impact, his overall gravity that he carries as a player. And the Packers need him to get going. I know he's, him and Love haven't been able to connect, but they got to keep going back to him. They got to find a way to get him going because he is a key player within this offense if they are going to find consistent success this season. So there you have it, my friends. Those are my instant takeaways from the Green Bay Packers performance. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So until next time, friends,